A bank employee discriminates against a young black girl trying to deposit money and is left stunned by her mother. That chilly Monday morning, as the city still yawned under the sound of heels striking damp pavements and engines rumbling impatiently around street corners, Jasmine Porter pushed firmly against the heavy revolving door of the prestigious Oaked Bank. She was just 14, but there was something in her eyes that didn't match her age. Resolve. Conviction. She wore her school uniform not as a formality, but like a suit of armor, a pristine navy blazer, a knee-length straight skirt, and black shoes polished with care. She was alone, and she insisted on it. She clutched a folder carefully. Inside it was a check worth £5,000, not just a piece of paper, but a symbol of tireless effort, of sleepless nights and triumphs over exams. It was a reward for her academic excellence. A gift, not quite, a victory, and above all, a doorway to the future. She didn't want anyone meddling in that step. Not her parents, not her teachers, least of all, some bank clerk. That moment belonged to her, and she was determined to see it through. In Jasmine's mind, the simple act of walking into the bank and depositing the check by herself was more than a financial task. It was a statement, a silent cry, I can. I am capable. I don't need anyone to validate my place here. But what she didn't expect was what came next. The bank manager, a white man in a spotless suit, with eyes trained to assess and judge, glanced at her sideways as she approached the counter. A glance that, for a fleeting second, tried to strip away the dignity she had so fiercely cultivated. A glance that held more than just doubt, it held prejudice. As if that girl, with her pristine uniform and neatly held folder, had no right to be standing there. And it was in that precise moment, even before she could open her folder and present the check, that the real tension began. Because just beyond the glass door, someone else was about to enter. Someone who would not allow that injustice to go unchallenged. Jasmine's mother. And what she did in that instant changed everything. She approached the counter clutching the folder tightly against her chest, as if it held not just a check, but her very sense of worth. Every step was deliberate, heavy with the awareness that she was challenging the world to see her, truly ver her. Across the bright, polished floor of Oaked Bank, the branch manager, Victoria Hayes, had already fixed her gaze. A woman of refined appearance, her hair neatly tied back in a bun, dressed in a tailored blazer and exuding the authority of someone used to being in control and passing judgment. As Jasmine handed the check to the cashier, Victoria's carefully rehearsed smile faltered, just for a moment. A tiny crack in the mask. A check for £5,000? She repeated, her voice slightly louder than necessary, enough for nearby customers to overhear. And for a girl your age? I'd really like to know. Where did this money come from? Heat rushed to Jasmine's face, but she stood her ground. She drew a breath, lifted her chin with quiet pride, and extended her documents. It's from my scholarship, she said, with the composure of someone who's had to prove herself far too often. Along with the check, she offered the official letter and her school ID. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained calm, unwavering. The young cashier, whose name badge read Tom, lifted the check towards the light, inspecting it with narrowed eyes as if expecting some hidden flaw to emerge. Seconds passed, each one thick with silence. Then he glanced over at Victoria, who was now striding over with sharp, deliberate steps, her heels striking the floor like a gavel. We've had a number of suspicious checks coming through recently, she announced, not bothering to look Jasmine in the eye. Her tone was clipped and clinical, void of warmth. We'll need to carry out a full verification. Jasmine's stomach twisted. She had thought this would be straightforward. Instead, she felt as if she were being treated like a criminal. And worse still, she'd left her mobile phone in her locker at school. "I need to call my mum," she said quietly. "She's waiting for me. I've no way to contact her." "That's not our concern," Victoria snapped, unmoved. "You'll have to wait until we've completed our checks." And just like that, she turned and walked off, not offering even a flicker of empathy. Her steps echoed behind her like a door slamming shut. Jasmine remained where she was, rooted to the spot, while curious glances and whispers began to ripple through the branch. She felt exposed, belittled, as though her very presence here was being questioned. She walked to a corner of the room and leaned against the wall, arms folded tight across her chest like a shield. She fought the urge to cry, tried to appear taller, stronger. From across the room, Victoria watched. Not with compassion, but with that same gaze that said she believed she had the right to decide who belonged in places like these. And in that moment, more than ever, Jasmine understood. This wasn't just a bureaucratic hurdle. It was a quiet, invisible battle. And she had no intention of losing it. The surrounding atmosphere remained lively, but for Jasmine, it felt like she was on display in a glass case. Scrutinized, examined, judged. Every whisper echoed louder than it should. Each curious glance felt heavier. The cold marble floor seemed to seep through her shoes, numbing her feet. Time dragged on, stretching itself out like a cruel joke. Still, her mind stayed alert. From a young age, Jasmine had learned to spot the things others pretended not to see. The subtle shifts in tone, the smiles reserved only for certain people, the unspoken rules about who belonged and who didn't. She had witnessed it before, but never this close. Never like this. Across the room, Victoria, the manager, leaned over to speak quietly with Tom, one of the staff members. "We have to maintain standards in this branch. Not just anyone can walk in and expect to be treated like they belong." The words struck Jasmine like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't about safety. It was about judgment. About drawing lines between those who were welcome and those who were merely tolerated. What mattered wasn't merit. It was appearance. Trying to compose herself, she scanned the room more carefully now. A well-dressed elderly couple had been greeted with warm smiles and led to a private room. A man with a foreign accent had been dismissed with cold indifference. Moments later, a white couple presented identical documents to hers, and were assisted immediately with exaggerated friendliness. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just poor service. It was discrimination. Quiet, calculated, and deeply hurtful. She knew it. And what hurt more was that no one else seemed to care. Victoria turned to the security guard standing nearby and said, "Keep an eye on her. I don't want her leaving without my permission." Jasmine's heart began to race. She fought back the tears. She knew her rights. She had every reason to be there. But it was as though her presence alone was a threat, or worse, invisible. Minutes dragged on like hours. The echo of Victoria's heels clicking against the marble floor felt almost mocking. Each muffled laugh, each whisper, weighed on her shoulders like lead. Doubt began to creep in, eating away at her self-worth. Then, something caught her attention. Victoria was speaking with a tall, imposing man. It took Jasmine a moment, but then she recognized him, Harrison Wells. Her mother had mentioned him before, more than once, a rival of the very company she now led. Victoria handed him a folder with one word printed boldly on the cover, "Confidential." In that moment, Jasmine's fear gave way to clarity. She reached for the notebook she always carried in her bag and began writing. Names, times, fragments of the conversation she could overhear. It wasn't just her way of coping. It was her way of resisting. She was no longer merely the target of prejudice. She was a witness to something far more serious. Perhaps even an act of betrayal against her own mother's company. And Jasmine knew she had to document everything. Every detail mattered now. As soon as the man walked away, Victoria returned to the counter. Her face was tense, and the forced smile from earlier had completely vanished. When her eyes locked onto Jasmine, there was no need for words. Her glare said it all. "I know you saw." "Why is she still here?" Victoria hissed through clenched teeth, clearly angry. "Get rid of her. She doesn't belong here." That was the final straw. Jasmine could no longer stay silent. "I'm not a problem," she said firmly, her voice steady. "I'm here because I earned a scholarship. I just want to deposit my cheque, like anyone else would." Victoria didn't reply. She turned to the security guard standing nearby and said coldly, "Take her to the back. Keep her there until I say otherwise." He didn't question it. He took Jasmine by the arm and led her through the bank. Every pair of eyes followed her. Not a single voice rose in her defense. Not a word. Not even a whisper. "Stay here," the guard ordered, pointing to a quiet corner near the storage room, still within view of the main hall. Jasmine obeyed. She folded her arms and lifted her chin, refusing to lower her gaze. On the outside, she looked composed. Inside, however, she was falling apart. Then, as if summoned by her daughter's silent cry, Naomi Porter walked into the bank. Jasmine's heart jumped. Her mother entered like a force of nature, elegant, commanding, with a gaze that offered no room for injustice. The moment she saw her daughter standing alone, Naomi's eyes narrowed. She walked over, slow but purposeful. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice warm but unwavering. "I am, Mum. But you need to hear what happened." Jasmine held out her notebook and told her everything. Every detail. The way customers had been treated differently, the hushed exchange with Harrison Wells, Victoria's behavior from the very start. Naomi listened without interrupting. But her eyes burned with quiet fury. When Jasmine had finished, Naomi turned calmly to Victoria. "Miss Hayes," she said, her tone sharp as glass, "I believe you owe my daughter an apology. And to me, a clear explanation." Victoria tried to deflect, offering a nervous smile. But Naomi cut her off without hesitation. "Don't waste your breath. I know exactly what you've done. You shared confidential information with Mr. Wells. That's not just unprofessional, it's corporate espionage." The entire bank fell into stunned silence. Even the background hum of voices and movement had vanished. "You're dismissed," Naomi concluded, her voice calm and absolute. Effective immediately. No one dared to argue. The same building that, only moments earlier, had tolerated silent discrimination now stood still, bearing witness to justice spoken aloud, not whispered, not delayed. Firm, direct, unmistakable. The same security guard who, just hours earlier, had dragged Jasmine to the back of the branch was now escorting Victoria out of the bank. Total silence. Every pair of eyes followed their steps. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Not fear, but relief. Something was finally shifting. Naomi turned to the staff and customers still present. Her voice was steady and unmistakably firm. "This bank will undergo a full audit. Real changes are coming. From today on, no one will ever be treated with the disrespect my daughter faced here." A few months later, the truth surfaced. The manager really had been involved in a scheme to sabotage Naomi's business. It wasn't just suspicion, it was fact. She was dismissed. The bank underwent a major restructuring. New training programs were rolled out. And the one employee who had shown Jasmine kindness and respect, she was promoted to team leader. Jasmine changed too, but not in the way some might have expected. She didn't shrink back or become more timid. Quite the opposite. She grew stronger. She shared her story at school, then at an assembly, then another, and another. Once a quiet girl, She became a young woman who inspired others. She stood up for equality. She became a voice of courage. And she learnt something that no classroom teaches. The world isn't always fair. But if you stay silent, it stays that way. If you speak up, even with trembling hands, you can start to change it. Not always instantly, not always easily, but change comes. Sometimes, all it takes is a single sentence. One stand. One moment where you say, I won't accept this. And just like that, the seed is planted. The revolution begins. And what once seemed like just another ordinary day becomes the beginning of a story no one will ever forget.